It's time for episode 32 of the Mystical Times blog podcast with me, Michelle Eve. This episode is called Supernatural Somerset. Somerset is a southwest county in England and has a range of landscapes, from the Somerset Levels, which is dotted with isolated hills known as isles, the most famous being Glastonbury Tor, to the flat wetlands, the rugged hills, and the dramatic coastline. Somerset has had a varied and interesting history, including those who once lived here and helped to shape the county that you see today. Maybe those who did once live here do not want to leave after they've died, so hang around the areas and buildings that were prevalent in their lives. If these ghostly experiences that I will share with you are to be believed, Somerset is a very spooky county indeed. The hauntings of Dunster Castle. Dunster Castle is situated high on a hill overlooking the medieval town of Dunster and is on the north-east boundary of Exmoor National Park in Somerset. The castle's history spans over 1,000 years, so as you may imagine, it has had some very strange and spooky experiences happen within its walls. The castle and grounds are now run by the National Trust, and there are also ghost walks which tell of some of the spooky tales and some of the horrific history of the castle. And here are just a few of those ghostly experiences. One of the cleaners who worked in the castle was stopped in her tracks by seeing a ghostly figure of a man wearing a strange and very old-fashioned military uniform. The area called the Leather Gallery was later found to have been the dormitory where the royalist soldiers slept. The castle had been conquered by the royalists during the Civil War, and the soldiers set up inside the castle. A man, dressed all in green, has been seen many times walking through what is now the National Trust shop, but once seen, he just disappears. The building was once a stable block, which was built in the 17th century. Also in the shop, a strange green light is seen, which has been reported as just bobbing along, and it makes me wonder if the man in green and the green light are the same entity. A rather strange experience was when someone was working in the Blue Kitchen. The Blue Kitchen is a 1950s kitchen that's set within the castle. So when this person glanced down towards the floor, he saw a disembodied human foot. There is an oubliette where a male skeleton was found. His skeleton was in the position in which he died, with his wrists and ankles manacled to the wall, probably left to starve to death. The notable aspect of this was that the man had been over 7 feet tall. An excavation took place in the 17th century in which his skeleton was discovered, and the remains were just left there. Another excavation was made in the 19th century, confirming the extremely tall skeleton. Rumour has it that the skeleton still remains in situ, and the oubliette was covered over. The oubliette is by the gatehouse, which is in one of the towers, and it's in this area that cries and screams of both men and women are heard. Another note of interest is that on the castle grounds there is a working water mill. There is a theory that running water can be an element to any paranormal activity that occurs to buildings near it. Supernatural happenings in a Somerset house. At an undisclosed address, 3 miles from the Somerset county town of Taunton, strange events were being witnessed. A report from the Somerset County Herald newspaper in 1947 told of these events as they had interviewed the witnesses. This large house, or parts of it, was said to have been from the 13th century, built possibly as a retreat for the monks of Taunton Priory, whilst the newer parts of this house were built in 1594. First to be interviewed was a young woman who was said to have come across as educated and level-headed. In her bedroom for the last few months, the sound of a ticking clock was heard around 11:30 p.m. The ticking sound would last for around 30 minutes or so. At first it came from the wall, on which her headboard was against. The sound would then move into mid-air, towards the middle of the room. The young woman's terrier dog would sleep in a dog's basket in the bedroom, but as the ticking sound started, the dog would leave his bed and go and sleep in another corner of the room. He would then return to his basket once the ticking sound had stopped. The heavy oak door of the bedroom would also be gently opened, then gently closed, with the click of the latch, as though an invisible entity had entered the room. There was a bookcase on the opposite side of the bedroom, which had glass-panelled doors. These doors were locked, but this unseen spectre would be able to open them, and when the doors were shut, they were locked shut. The terrier dog would growl when this happened, as though aware of this unseen presence. The young woman said she wasn't afraid, and thought this activity was carried out by someone who had once lived in the house and was, perhaps, interested in who resided there currently. Interesting to note that this ticking sound was also experienced by the previous tenant too. In another part of the house, in a bedroom called the Blue Room, there seemed to be another ghost whose behaviour was quite different from the other bedroom ghost. The son of the then current tenant was a scientist who is conscious of an unseen presence, who would be heard talking in the early hours of the morning, waking the young man up. It happened so often that the man moved rooms so he could get an undisturbed sleep. He was rather annoyed with having to move rooms. A guest of the household, a Roman Catholic woman, was to stay in the Blue Room. She was aware of the young man's experience in that room, so she had asked for the protection of St. Francis and went on to have a fully refreshing sleep that night. It was several weeks later when the young man went back into the Blue Room to mend an electric switch, and he was to hear the voice again. He asked out for the ghost to speak more clearly, but got no response. He then went out of the room to ask the others in the house if they had spoken to him, but they hadn't. So he went back into the room to finish the job, and the voice was heard again. Several months later, on a calm evening, the tenant of the house was in the Blue Room, mending a window catch. The door to the room was wide open, but the door was suddenly slammed shut, and when the tenant went to open it, he found he was locked in. No one else was in the house at the time, so the tenant had no choice but to climb out the window. He re-entered the house and went upstairs, only to find the door to the Blue Room wide open. There have also been audible voices heard coming from the Blue Room, and these are heard whilst people are on the lawn, which the Blue Room overlooks. There has also been local talk about a phantom white horse running wildly on this lawn, but this had not been witnessed by those living at the property in 1947. That's all for this episode, and I do hope you enjoyed hearing those haunting experiences from Somerset. For the next episode, episode 33, I will be talking about the Crumbles, ghosts and murders. Till next time.